Demand for EVs dies. Car manufacturers are freaking out. It's surprising how quickly car manufacturers shifted gears, abandoning years of internal combustion engine or ICE development to chase the electric vehicle craze. For decades, these companies perfected the craft of making cars that people genuinely enjoyed. But when the EV hype took over, they couldn't jump ship fast enough. Now that the demand for EVs is plummeting, they're left in a panic, scrambling to figure out how to recover from this misstep. But let's take a step back to see how they fell into this error in the first place. The role of propaganda. Propaganda is a powerful thing. It's not just individuals that fall for it, entire industries can be swept up in it as well. Car manufacturers, once proud of their ICE advancements, were persuaded by the push for green technology and the promise of EVs. In their haste to appear progressive, they turned their backs on the very technology that made them successful. One of the most shocking things about the switch is how many legendary car brands were fully committed to going electric by 2030. We're not talking about new startups with something to prove. We're talking about icons like Jaguar, Alfa Romeo, and Aston Martin. These are brands that built their reputations on powerful engines, beautiful design, and engineering excellence, and now they're throwing all that away in the name of going fully electric. For brands like Jaguar, known for their roaring engines and luxury appeal, this shift feels like a betrayal of their very soul. How does an electric Jaguar match the legacy of a company that built cars like the E-Type, once called the most beautiful car in the world? The rumble of an ICE engine has always been part of Jaguar's identity. It's the same story with Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin. These brands have always been about the thrill of driving, the raw connection between driver and machine, something that a silent, battery-powered car simply can't replicate. It's not just about nostalgia either. These companies spent decades perfecting their ICE technologies. They developed engines that pushed the boundaries of performance, efficiency, and engineering. To see them now abandoning that expertise to chase after an electric motor is hard to stomach. The real irony is that while they're busy erasing their own history, the demand for EVs is nosediving. Declining EV demand. Reports of declining EV sales and production cuts, especially from big names like Ford with their F-150 Lightning and Audi, are telling a story that isn't in line with the optimistic projections we've been hearing for years. The reality? Consumer enthusiasm for EVs is fading, and fast. Take Ford for instance. The F-150 Lightning was supposed to be a game changer, the electric version of America's most popular truck. Yet just a couple of years into production, Ford is slashing output because the demand supply isn't there. People aren't lining up to buy these EVs the way the industry predicted. Audi is seeing a similar story unfold with cuts to their EV production as sales stall. These aren't just isolated incidents, they're signals that the big EV push is not going as planned. A big part of the problem is the price tag. EVs were hyped as the future of affordable, sustainable transportation, but the reality is that they come with a hefty cost. For most consumers, the price of an EV, especially compared to a traditional ICE vehicle, is just too high to justify the switch. Add in the fact that many of these EVs don't deliver the kind of range or convenience that people expect, and it's no wonder that enthusiasm is cooling off. This is more than just a bump in the road. It's a clear sign that the transition to EVs isn't unfolding the way automakers had hoped. Consumers aren't flocking to electric showrooms. In fact, they're pulling back. High prices, charging infrastructure issues, and underwhelming demand are all playing a part. People are realizing that EVs, at least right now, don't offer enough to make the switch from their reliable, more affordable ICE cars. Automakers who once seemed confident that an EV revolution was right around the corner are starting to panic as the cracks in the plan grow more obvious. The promised mass adoption of electric vehicles is looking less and less likely as more reports of production cuts and disappointing sales roll in. This is not the unstoppable EV future we were all told to expect. Instead, it's becoming clear that many consumers just aren't convinced, and the demand for these vehicles is drying up faster than manufacturers can keep up with. Why is this happening? The EV market is showing signs of fatigue. High costs, limited range, and a lack of infrastructure are turning people off. Fans of these brands feel abandoned. There are people who have spent years, and in some cases decades, loyal to Jaguar, Alfa Romeo, and Aston Martin because of what they represented: craftsmanship, performance, and passion. Now with the decision to go fully electric, that relationship feels one-sided. It's no wonder there's a growing backlash. The automakers, once champions of engineering excellence, are now seen as sellouts to the EV hype. This shift doesn't just damage the brands in the short term, it risks destroying the emotional connection they've built with their customers over generations. What's worse, many of these brands seem to be under the illusion that they can simply transition to EVs and retain their loyal following. But as the demand for electric cars continues to dwindle, it's becoming clear that this is not the case. The idea that people will rush to replace their ICE cars with electric ones by 2030 is looking more and more like wishful thinking. Consumers aren't ready, the infrastructure isn't there, and the excitement just isn't materializing. All these brands are left with the question of how much longer they can cling to the unsustainable dream before it turns into a nightmare. EVs also play a part. EVs simply lack the character and appeal that traditional internal combustion engine cars bring to the table. Iconic brands like Jaguar, Alfa Romeo, and Aston Martin built their reputation on the visceral experience of driving. Those roaring engines, the mechanical precision, the thrill that comes with pressing the gas pedal. With EVs, all of that kinda just vanishes. What's left? Well, a silent, sterile driving experience that feels more like piloting an appliance than driving a car with personality. This shift leads to a bigger problem. When everything becomes electric, brands risk losing what made them special in the first place. The unique sound of a Jaguar engine, the lively handling of an Alfa, the raw power of an Aston Martin, it all fades to blandness when you take away the ICE. These brands, once celebrated for their individuality and engineering excellence, could end up producing vehicles that are indistinguishable from one another. The EV landscape doesn't allow much room for variety. Under the hood, it's just batteries and electric motors. In fact, there's a fear that the automotive world could start resembling something like a state-owned manufacturer model, where every car looks, drives, and feels the same, devoid of any real identity or innovation. It's like looking at North Korea's one-size-fits-all approach to products. When every car company goes electric, we're left with a fleet of vehicles that might as well come off the same assembly line, regardless of the brand. That's not what people want, especially those who have been loyal to brands with rich histories and distinct personalities. With this shift, automakers aren't just abandoning their legacy, they're handing it over in exchange for a generic one-size-fits-all future that robs cars of their soul. And as we've already seen, the excitement for this electric future isn't nearly as strong as the automakers had hoped. It's a gamble that risks turning these once great brands into purveyors of bland, forgettable vehicles. The people's opposition to EV adoption. Many car buyers, especially those who invest in high-end brands like Ferrari and Lamborghini, are pushing back hard against the idea of electric vehicles. It's not just about practicality. It's about passion. When someone buys a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, they're not just buying a car. They're buying an experience. A huge part of the experience is the sound, the feel, and the thrill of a roaring engine. The whole identity of these brands is tied to the heart-pounding power of an internal combustion engine, so it's no surprise that there's skepticism about electric versions of these cars. Imagine buying a Ferrari that doesn't roar when you press the gas pedal. It just feels wrong, almost like something essential is missing. Why would anyone want an electric Ferrari when a major part of what makes it special, that legendary engine, is no longer there? High-end brands like these thrive on the emotional connection between the driver and the machine. The raw sound, the mechanical feedback, the thrill of controlling such immense power, that's what people pay for. An EV, no matter how fast or advanced, just doesn't offer the same experience. There's a deep skepticism among luxury car buyers about whether EVs can ever match what ICE vehicles bring to the table. For them, it's not just about technology or performance specs, it's about tradition, heritage, and the visceral experience of driving. And when you strip away those iconic elements, what's left? An electric Ferrari might be fast, but without that unmistakable engine roar, it loses a huge part of its identity. The same goes for Lamborghini and other high-end brands. For these buyers, sticking with traditional engines just isn't a preference, it's a statement. They're showing that they value the craftsmanship and engineering that goes into making an ICE supercar. They don't want a quiet, efficient vehicle. They want a car that makes their heart race and turns heads as it thunders down the road. The EV trend just doesn't appeal to that same crowd. And this reluctance from high-end buyers signals that the EV revolution may not be as inevitable as some would like to think. There's a strong pushback from those who don't see the point in going electric when the traditional engines they love still deliver everything they want and more. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this.